Hey everyone, quick question before we dive in. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. I was sitting at the kitchen island when the text came through. The same island where, 3 years ago, Marcus had knelt down and proposed with a ring he'd spent 6 months saving for. The same island where we'd planned our wedding, our future, our everything. Now it was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and my husband of 11 years was texting me from the guest bedroom, the room he'd been sleeping in for the past 4 months because of his insomnia and need for space. Marcus, I've retained legal counsel. All further communication regarding the dissolution of our marriage will go through my attorney, David Chen. Do not contact me directly. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I was shocked. I wasn't. I'd known this was coming for exactly 7 months, 14 days, and I glanced at the clock. About 3 hours. What I was doing was savoring it. The way you savor the first sip of wine after a long, brutal day. The way you savor the silence after a storm finally breaks. Marcus thought he was being strategic. He thought the late-night text, the cold legal language, the do not contact me directly, he thought all of it made him look powerful, in control. The man who'd planned his exit so carefully that his wife wouldn't see it coming. Poor Marcus. He had no idea that I'd seen it coming before he'd even started planning it. I set my phone down on the granite countertop, picked up my wine glass, the one he'd bought me for our 5th anniversary, back when he still remembered things like anniversaries. Took a slow sip. Then I picked up my phone again and typed one word. Me. Understood. I hit send. Watched the blue bubble appear. Watched it deliver. Then I opened my email and sent a pre-drafted message to my own attorney, Linda Park, with the subject line, Phase 2, Initiate. Linda replied in under 30 seconds. On it. Sleep well, Claire. I finished my wine. I slept like a baby. The next morning, I woke up at 6:15 a.m., my usual time because routines matter, because control matters, because I'd learned a long time ago that the person who controls their morning controls their day. I made my coffee. I did my yoga. I showered, dressed in the charcoal blazer and cream silk blouse I'd laid out the night before, and I drove to the office of Hartwell and Associates, the accounting firm I'd built from nothing 11 years ago. The same firm Marcus had joined 6 years ago when his marketing career wasn't taking off the way he'd hoped. The same firm where he'd eventually become a partner, in name only, because I'd never put him on the actual ownership documents. I'd told myself it was because I was protecting the business. The truth was, some part of me had always known. I walked past the reception desk, waved to Marisol, who'd been with me since year 2, and went straight to my corner office. I sat at my desk. I opened my laptop, and I pulled up the folder I'd labeled insurance. It was beautiful, organized, meticulous. 7 months of documentation, cross-referenced and time-stamped, every piece of evidence cataloged with the precision of a forensic accountant. Because that's what I was. That's what I'd always been. And Marcus, sweet, arrogant, short-sighted Marcus, had forgotten that the woman he married wasn't just his wife. She was the person who'd built a 7-figure business from a laptop and a dining room table. She was the person who'd taught herself to read balance sheets the way other people read novels. She was the person who never, ever left anything to chance. The first photograph was dated November 14th of last year. Marcus leaving a restaurant on 5th Street with a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, blonde, wearing a red coat that probably cost more than my first car. They weren't touching. They weren't kissing. But they were close. Too close. And the way he held the door for her, the way he laughed at something she said, I knew that laugh. I knew the tilt of his head, the crinkle at the corner of his eyes. I'd fallen in love with that laugh. Now it was being aimed at someone else. I'd hired a private investigator the next day, not because I wanted to catch him, because I wanted to know. Knowledge is power. And I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I made a single move. The PI's reports came in weekly. I read them like other people read the morning news, with coffee, with focus, with a growing sense of clarity. Marcus and the blonde woman, eventually identified as Vanessa Caldwell, meeting at hotels, at restaurants, at a condo in the Marina district that Marcus had supposedly sold 2 years ago. The same condo I'd found paperwork for in his home office drawer, the paperwork showing he'd never sold it at all. He'd transferred it to an LLC. An LLC I'd traced to a shell company. A shell company I'd traced to a bank account in Vanessa's name. That was when I'd started digging into the finances. Not because I was angry. Anger is a luxury for people who have the luxury of being surprised. I wasn't surprised. I was calculating. And what I found made the affair look like a parking ticket. Over the past 18 months, Marcus had been systematically diverting funds from Hartwell and Associates. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here, a few thousand there, buried in consulting fees and vendor payments and marketing expenses. Then larger amounts. Then, 3 months ago, a single transfer of $87,000 to an account I eventually traced to Vanessa Caldwell. $87,000. From our business. From the business I'd built while he was finding himself. From the business that paid our mortgage, our cars, our life. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel particularly angry, not in the way people expect. What I felt was something colder, something harder, something that settled into my bones like winter and refused to thaw. I felt resolved. I spent the next 4 months building my case, not just for divorce, for everything. I documented every fraudulent transfer. I traced every shell company back to its source. I compiled spreadsheets that would make a forensic auditor weep with joy. I saved every text, every email, every suspicious charge on every credit card. And then, because I am who I am, because I believe in being thorough, because I believe in winning, I started looking into Vanessa Caldwell. She was 32, originally from Portland, no criminal record. Worked as a brand consultant, which seemed to mean she got paid to look pretty at parties and post about them on Instagram. She and Marcus had met at a networking event 18 months ago. Classic. But something about her bothered me, something I couldn't put my finger on. She was too perfect, too convenient, too exactly the kind of woman a man like Marcus would fall for. Young, beautiful, adoring, always available, never demanding anything real. So I'd done what any thorough person would do. I'd sent a sample of Marcus's DNA from a hair I'd plucked from his pillow, back when he still slept in our bed, and a sample of Vanessa's DNA from a coffee cup she'd left at a cafe, because people who think they're invisible get careless, to a private lab. I'd paid extra for expedited results. I'd told them it was for a paternity test, which was technically true. Just not the kind of paternity test they were expecting. The results had come back 3 weeks ago. I'd read them sitting in this exact chair, at this exact desk, with the same coffee mug I was holding now. My hands hadn't shaken. My heart hadn't raced. I'd just read the numbers, processed the conclusion, and felt something shift inside me. Not shock. Not even surprise, really. Just the deep, cold certainty that the universe sometimes hands you weapons you didn't know you were building. Vanessa Caldwell and Marcus Hartwell shared 49.9% of their DNA half-siblings. Marcus had been adopted. He'd told me that on our third date, over Thai food at a restaurant that no longer existed. His birth mother had been 16, unable to care for him, and he'd been placed with the Hartwells when he was 3 days old. He'd never known her, never tried to find her. The Hartwells are my real parents, he'd said, and I'd loved him for that certainty, that loyalty, that ability to know where he belonged. He had no idea that his birth mother had gone on to have another child, a daughter she'd kept, a daughter who'd grown up to become Vanessa Caldwell, brand consultant, Instagram influencer, and, apparently, the woman her own half-brother was having an affair with. Neither of them knew. I was certain of that. Marcus would never have pursued Vanessa if he'd known. He had many flaws, but he wasn't that kind of man. And Vanessa was too smart, too image-conscious to ever knowingly sleep with her own brother. No, this was a tragic coincidence, a cruel twist of biological fate, and I was going to use it, not because I wanted to humiliate them, not because I wanted to destroy them, but because I needed Marcus to understand, truly and completely, that he had never been in control. That every move he'd made, every lie he'd told, every dollar he'd stolen, it had all been visible to me. It had all been allowed. And now, it was time to stop allowing it. The text from Marcus's attorney came at 9:30 a.m. while I was reviewing the final draft of Linda's filing. David Chen. Mrs. Hartwell, this is David Chen, representing Marcus Hartwell in the dissolution of your marriage. Mr. Hartwell has instructed me to inform you that all joint accounts have been frozen pending equitable distribution. You will receive formal notice shortly. Please direct all communication through this number. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Linda with a note. He's trying to freeze assets. Proceed with counterfiling. Linda called me 5 minutes later. Claire, I just got off the phone with Chen. He's claiming Marcus acted to protect marital assets from dissipation. He's trying to paint you as the one draining accounts. Is he? I said, and I could hear the smile in my own voice. That's interesting. Because I have 18 months of bank records showing Marcus transferring a total of $247,000 from Hartwell and Associates to accounts controlled by his paramour. I have LLC documentation showing he hid a condo from the marital estate. And I paused, savoring the moment. A rather fascinating DNA report I think the court will find very relevant to questions of character and credibility. Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then, Claire, what did you do? I did what I always do, Linda. I prepared. File the counter complaint. Include everything. The fraudulent transfers, the hidden assets, the affair, and yes, the DNA results. I want it all on the record. Claire, the DNA thing, that's going to destroy him. Publicly? Permanently. Yes, I said. It is. I hung up. I opened my desk drawer and took out the DNA report, the original, not a copy. I ran my fingers over the lab's letterhead. I thought about the 16-year-old girl who'd given up Marcus, who'd kept Vanessa, who'd created this strange, twisted connection without ever knowing it would end here. Then I put the report back in the drawer and went back to work. Marcus called me at 2:15 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 2:17, again at 2:20. At 2:23, he texted, Claire, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. I didn't reply. At 2:30, Linda texted, counter complaint filed. Chen just called me. He sounds concerned. At 3:45, Marcus showed up at the office. I was in a meeting with the Henderson account, a client I'd had for 8 years, a client who trusted me because I'd never given them a reason not to. Marisol buzzed through. Claire, Marcus is here. He says it's urgent. I finished my sentence. I shook hands with the Hendersons. I walked them to the door, smiling, professional, completely in control. Then I turned to face my husband. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. A habit he had when he was stressed, when he was losing, when he was realizing that the world wasn't bending to his will the way he'd expected. His eyes were red-rimmed. His shirt was wrinkled. He looked like a man who'd just been told his life was over. In a way, he had. Claire, he said, and his voice cracked. What the hell did you do? I walked past him into my office. He followed. I closed the door. I sat behind my desk, in my office, in my building, and I gestured for him to sit. He didn't. He stood there, trembling, his hands clenched into fists. David called me. He said you filed something. Something about fraud? About hidden assets? Claire, that's insane. I never... You transferred $247,000 from our business to accounts controlled by Vanessa Caldwell, I said. My voice was calm, almost gentle. You hid a condo in the Marina District through an LLC. You claimed it was sold, but you've been using it as a love nest for the past 18 months. Should I continue? Or do you want to save us both time and admit what you did? He went pale. Actually pale. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. How did you? I'm an accountant, Marcus. I find things. It's what I do. I opened my laptop, turned it to face him. Here's the spreadsheet. Every transfer, every shell company, every lie. I've been documenting this for 7 months. Since November 14th, actually. The night I saw you leaving Marchetti's with Vanessa. Do you remember that night? You told me you were working late. He sat down. Hard. Like his legs had given out. Claire, I can explain. Can you? I tilted my head. Can you explain why you stole from our business? Can you explain why you hid assets from the marital estate? Can you explain why you thought you could text me at 11:47 p.m., tell me to talk to your lawyer, and expect me to just… What? Roll over? Accept it? I thought you didn't know. You thought I was stupid, I said. And for the first time, I felt something. Not anger. Not even satisfaction. Just a deep, weary sadness. You thought I was the woman who built a business from nothing, who worked 16-hour days while you found yourself, who handled every crisis and every problem and every detail of our life. And you thought I wouldn't notice when you started stealing from me? When you started lying to me? When you started fucking another woman in a condo I paid for? He flinched. Claire, please. And here's the part that's really going to hurt, Marcus. I reached into my desk drawer. I pulled out the DNA report. I slid it across the desk. You should read this. It's quite fascinating. He picked it up. He read the first page, then the second. Then he looked up at me, and his eyes were empty. Completely empty. What is this? It's a DNA comparison, I said. Between you and Vanessa Caldwell. You share 49.9% of your DNA. Do you know what that means? He shook his head. Slowly, like he was underwater. It means you're half-siblings, Marcus. Same mother. Different fathers. She was born 6 years after you were adopted. Your birth mother kept her. Didn't keep you. Ironic, isn't it? The report fell from his hands. He stared at me, his mouth open, his face a mask of horror and disbelief, and something else. Something I almost felt sorry for. Almost. No, he whispered. No, that's not possible. Vanessa is… we never… You did, Marcus. Repeatedly. For 18 months. In the condo you hid from me. With the money you stole from our business. I stood up. I walked around the desk. I stood over him, looking down at the man I'd loved, the man I'd trusted, the man who'd betrayed me in every way a person can be betrayed. And now it's all in a court filing. Public record. Available to anyone who wants to read it. He looked up at me, and his eyes were wet. Claire, please. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. You have to believe me. I do believe you, I said. I believe you didn't know. I believe Vanessa didn't know. I believe this is all a terrible, tragic accident. But here's what I also believe, Marcus. I believe you stole from me. I believe you lied to me. I believe you tried to destroy everything I built while I was sleeping in the next room, trusting you, loving you, planning a future with you. And I believe that accidents have consequences. Even terrible ones. I walked back to my desk. I sat down. I picked up my phone and texted Linda. He's here. He knows. Proceed with everything. Then I looked at Marcus. You should go. Your attorney is probably trying to reach you. I suspect he has some bad news about the restraining order I filed and the emergency hearing to freeze your personal assets, and the criminal referral I made to the district attorney's office regarding the embezzlement. He stood up. He swayed. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Really seeing me. Not the version of me he'd created in his head. The supportive wife. The understanding partner. The woman who would always forgive. "Why?" he asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "Why didn't you just confront me? Why didn't you? Why all of this? The planning. The DNA test. The... Why didn't you just tell me you knew?" I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about all the nights I'd lain awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe in the guest bedroom, wondering what I'd done wrong, what I'd missed, where I'd failed. I thought about the spreadsheets, the PI reports, the DNA results. I thought about the text he'd sent at 11:47 p.m., the cold legal language, the "do not contact me directly." "Because you didn't want to talk to me, Marcus," I said. "You wanted to talk to your lawyer. So I made sure your lawyer would have a lot to talk about." He left. He didn't say another word. He just walked out of my office, out of my building, out of my life. I watched him go through the glass wall of my office, watched him stumble past Marisol's desk, watched him push through the front doors into the afternoon sunlight. Then I picked up my phone and called Linda. "How long until the hearing?" "3 weeks," she said. "But Claire, David Chen just called me back. He's withdrawing from the case. He says there's a conflict of interest. And Marcus is apparently having some kind of breakdown. He showed up at Vanessa's apartment, told her everything. She's not taking it well." I closed my eyes. I thought about Vanessa, the blonde woman in the red coat. The woman who'd smiled at Marcus across a restaurant table. The woman who'd unknowingly slept with her own half-brother. I thought about the horror she must be feeling, the disgust, the betrayal. I felt something that might have been pity, but it was distant, small, buried under everything else. "Good," I said. "Let's make sure the court knows everything. I want full restitution of the embezzled funds. I want the condo liquidated and the proceeds added to the marital estate. I want sole ownership of Hartwell and Associates. And I paused, considering. I want the district attorney to pursue criminal charges. Fraud, embezzlement, whatever sticks. I want him to understand that this isn't just a divorce, Marcus. This is the rest of his life." Linda was quiet for a moment. Then, "Claire, are you sure? Criminal charges? That's prison time. That's..." "I'm sure," I said. "He made his choices, Linda. Now he lives with them." The next 3 weeks were a blur of depositions and hearings and legal maneuvering that would have exhausted a lesser woman. But I wasn't a lesser woman. I was Claire Hartwell, founder and CEO of Hartwell and Associates, and I had spent 11 years building a life that Marcus had tried to tear down in 18 months. I was not going to let him succeed. The emergency hearing went exactly as planned. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Judge Morrison who had no patience for marital shenanigans, as she called them, granted my motion to freeze Marcus's personal assets. She ordered him to produce all financial records within 72 hours. She set a date for the full divorce trial, and she asked, with a look of barely concealed disgust, whether the DNA matter was going to be part of the proceedings. "It is, Your Honor," Linda said, "as evidence of Mr. Hartwell's character and credibility, and as it relates to the fraudulent transfers made to Ms. Caldwell's accounts." Judge Morrison looked at Marcus, who was sitting at the defendant's table with a new attorney, a harried-looking young man who'd clearly been handed a disaster and told to make it look manageable. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, "I strongly suggest you consider a settlement, because if half of what I've read is true, you are facing not just the loss of your marriage, but potentially your freedom." Marcus didn't say anything. He just stared at the table, his hands clasped in front of him, his shoulders hunched like a man waiting for a blow he knew he couldn't dodge. He didn't settle. I hadn't expected him to. Marcus had always been stubborn. One of the things I'd once loved about him, back when his stubbornness meant fighting for us, fighting for our future. Now it meant fighting a war he'd already lost. The trial lasted 4 days. I testified for 6 hours, walking the court through every fraudulent transfer, every hidden asset, every lie. I produced the spreadsheets, the bank records, the LLC documentation. I produced the DNA report, and I watched Marcus's face crumble as the judge read it into the record. Vanessa was subpoenaed. She testified that she hadn't known about the relation, that she'd met Marcus at a networking event, that she'd fallen for him the way women sometimes fall for charming, handsome men who tell them they're special. She cried on the stand. She looked at Marcus with a mixture of love and horror and something that might have been pity. I felt nothing. Or rather, I felt everything. The anger, the betrayal, the grief, the rage. But I felt it from a distance, like watching a storm through a window. I was done feeling things for Marcus. I was done letting him take up space in my heart. The verdict came on the 4th day. Judge Morrison ruled in my favor on every count. Marcus was ordered to repay the full $247,000, plus interest. The Marina District condo was ordered liquidated, with the proceeds added to the marital estate. I was granted sole ownership of Hartwell and Associates, with Marcus's partnership formally dissolved. And then, the part I'd been waiting for, Judge Morrison referred the case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. "The evidence of embezzlement and fraud is clear and compelling," she said, looking directly at Marcus. "Mr. Hartwell, I suggest you retain criminal counsel. You are going to need it." Marcus stood up. He looked at me, really looked at me. And for a moment, I saw the man I'd married. The man who'd made me laugh, who'd held me when I cried, who'd promised to love me forever. Then the moment passed. He turned and walked out of the courtroom, his new attorney scrambling to keep up, and I knew I would never see him again. The criminal case moved faster than I expected. The district attorney, an ambitious young woman named Sarah Kim, who saw Marcus's case as a stepping stone to bigger things, filed charges of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering within a month. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus had no defense. His attorney, his third one, after the first 2 withdrew, citing irreconcilable differences with the client, pled him out to a deal that included 18 months in state prison and 5 years of probation. I watched the sentencing from the gallery. Marcus stood before the judge, thinner than I remembered, his hair gray at the temples, his hands shaking. He spoke briefly, an apology, a claim of ignorance about Vanessa's identity, a plea for mercy. The judge gave him 18 months. It could have been worse. It could have been much worse. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked up at the gallery. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just looked at me, and I saw something in his expression that I hadn't expected. Understanding. He finally understood. Not just what I'd done, but why. Not just the mechanics of my revenge, but the architecture of it, the patience, the precision, the absolute unwavering commitment to making sure that every lie he'd told, every dollar he'd stolen, every moment of betrayal, that all of it came back to him. That all of it destroyed him. He understood that I'd been 3 moves ahead from the beginning, that I'd let him think he was winning while I built the trap around him, that my one-word text, understood, had been the opening salvo of a war he'd already lost. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just watched him go. And then I stood up and walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. I sold the house 6 weeks later. The house where Marcus had proposed, where we'd planned our future, where he'd texted me at 11:47 p.m. to tell me our marriage was over. I sold it for above asking price to a young couple who looked at each other the way Marcus and I had once looked at each other, with hope, with love, with the absolute certainty that they were building something that would last. I didn't tell them that certainty was an illusion, that love was a choice you made every day, not a feeling you coasted on. That the person who built your future with you could also be the person who tore it down. I just signed the papers, took the check, and walked away. Hartwell and Associates was thriving. I'd hired 2 new accountants, expanded into commercial real estate, and opened a satellite office in Denver. The Henderson account had referred 3 new clients. Marisol had been promoted to office manager. Everything I'd built, everything Marcus had tried to take, was bigger and stronger than before. And I was leaving it all behind. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Because I'd spent 11 years building a life with Marcus, and then 7 months destroying it, and now I needed to find out who I was when I wasn't defined by either of those things. I bought a one-way ticket to Portland. Not because of Vanessa. I had no interest in her, no desire for confrontation or closure or any of the things people think they need. I bought the ticket because Portland was where I'd always wanted to live, back when I was young and full of dreams, before Marcus and the business and the life that had become a cage. I rented a loft in the Pearl District. I bought furniture I liked, not furniture that matched Marcus's taste. I joined a hiking group. I took a pottery class. I started dating again, slowly, carefully, with a man named David who was kind and funny and had no idea who I used to be. 6 months after the sentencing, I got a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting, Marcus's, from a time when he still wrote me love notes and left them on my pillow. I almost threw it away, almost burned it unread, but I was done running from my past. I was done letting Marcus control any part of my life, even the part that lived in memory. I opened it. Claire, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did, and why you did what you did. And I want you to know that the worst part of prison isn't the bars or the food or the other inmates. The worst part is knowing that I had something perfect, something real, something that most people spend their whole lives searching for, and I threw it away because I was selfish and stupid and arrogant enough to think I could have everything without paying for anything. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to say that. I needed you to know that I finally see you, the real you, the woman who built empires and destroyed kings, the woman I was too blind to deserve. Be happy, Claire. Be everything I couldn't let you be. Marcus. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, put it in a box with the rest of my memories, and went back to my life. A year later, I was standing on the balcony of my loft, watching the sun set over the Willamette River, when my phone rang. Linda Park, calling from 3 time zones away. Claire, she said, and her voice was strange, tight, controlled, with an undercurrent of something I couldn't identify. You need to sit down. I'm standing, I said. What is it? It's Marcus. Claire, he's dead. The world tilted. Not because I still loved him. Not because I wanted him back. But because death is final in a way that prison isn't. Because no matter what he'd done, no matter what I'd done, he'd been a part of my life for 11 years. And now that part was over. Truly, completely over. How? I asked. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. He was released 2 months ago. He'd been staying at a halfway house, trying to get his life back together. He got a job at a warehouse. He was doing okay, from what his parole officer said. And then yesterday, he didn't show up for work. They found him in his apartment. Overdose. Heroin, they think. Accidental, probably. He'd never used before. But a lot of guys start in prison, and... She kept talking, but I stopped listening. I was thinking about the man I'd married, the man who'd knelt on a kitchen island and promised me forever. The man who'd sent me a cold text at 11:47 p.m. telling me to talk to his lawyer. The man who'd stolen from me, lied to me, betrayed me in every way a person can be betrayed. And the man who'd written me a letter from prison, telling me he finally saw me, telling me to be happy, telling me to be everything he couldn't let me be. Claire. Linda's voice, distant, concerned. Are you there? I'm here, I said. Thank you for telling me, Linda. Thank you. I hung up. I stood on the balcony and watched the sun finish setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and deep, burning red. I thought about Marcus, about Vanessa, about the DNA report and the courtroom and the 18 months he'd spent in prison. I thought about the text I'd sent back to him, a year and a half ago, in the kitchen of a house I no longer owned. One word. Understood. Had I understood? Really? Had I understood that my revenge would destroy him so completely that he'd end up dead in a halfway house with a needle in his arm? Had I understood that the woman I'd been, patient, precise, absolutely committed to winning, would create a chain of events that ended here, with a phone call at sunset and a silence that felt like judgment? I didn't know. I still don't. I think about it sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet and my thoughts are loud. I think about whether I could have stopped after the divorce, after the financial settlement, after I'd taken back everything he'd stolen. Whether I needed to push for criminal charges, for prison, for the complete and total destruction of his life. I think about whether the woman who sent that one-word text was a strategist or a monster. Whether there's a difference. But then I think about the $247,000, the hidden condo, the affair, the text at 11:47 p.m., "Do not contact me directly." And I remember how small I'd felt, how powerless, how utterly betrayed by the person who was supposed to love me most. And I think, he made his choices. I made mine. We both lived with them. The sun finished setting. The sky went dark. The city lights came on, one by one, a constellation of human ambition and hope and struggle, stretching out before me like a promise. I went inside. I poured a glass of wine. I sat by the window and watched the world go by. And I was happy. Not because Marcus was dead. Not because I'd won. But because I'd survived. Because I'd built something from the wreckage. Because I'd learned that the most powerful weapon isn't revenge, it's the ability to walk away, to start over, to become someone new. I picked up my phone. I texted David. My David. The kind one. The funny one. The one who knew me as Claire. Just Claire. Not Claire Hartwell the accountant, or Claire Hartwell the woman who destroyed her husband. "Dinner tonight?" I wrote. "There's a new Thai place on Hawthorne." He replied in seconds. "Wouldn't miss it." I smiled. I finished my wine. I got ready to go out into the world, into my life, into the future I'd built from the ashes of everything Marcus had tried to burn. And as I walked out the door, I thought about that one-word text one last time. Understood. I had understood. I understood everything. The betrayal, the planning, the revenge, the consequences. I understood that love is a choice, and so is hate. And so is the long, hard work of rebuilding yourself when both of those things are behind you. I understood that I was free. Not because Marcus was gone, but because I'd stopped letting him define me. Because I'd chosen to be more than the woman he'd betrayed, more than the woman who'd destroyed him, more than the sum of our shared tragedy. I was Claire. Just Claire. And that was enough. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more. And seriously, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? What time is it? I want to know who's out there. See you in the next one.